It was a quiet winter morning, the kind that made the city streets glisten like glass, cold and unforgiving. Snowflakes drifted lazily, settling on windowsills, car roofs, and the worn pavement. Inside a tiny bakery, a young woman sat frozen in her wheelchair. Her name was Emma, 22 years old. Once she had dreamed of the stage, of music, of applause. Now she stared at the smallest cake in the display, trembling slightly, counting her crumpled bills over and over. 3. That's all I have. Her whisper barely carried to the clerk, who looked down at the money with sorrow that didn't need words. $3. That was all Emma had to celebrate her birthday. $3 that had been saved slowly, painfully, coin by coin. Each nickel and penny a tiny sacrifice, meals skipped, heat turned low, winter coats worn thin. Every dollar a small testament to hope, however fragile. The bakery's door burst open suddenly, letting in a rush of cold air. Laughter followed, warm and bright, breaking the muted melancholy of the shop. A man entered, tall, composed, brown hair slightly tousled, holding the hand of a small girl, barely 6. Sophie. Her green eyes sparkled, her red coat bouncing as she dragged her father toward the display. Emma's heart clenched. She had once been a promising music student.
Her professors at the conservatory had said she had a rare gift, a way to play that could make listeners weep.
She lived and breathed music, practicing 8 hours a day, losing herself in the keys of a piano. But that all ended the night a drunk driver ran a red light. The sound of metal crushing metal haunted her dreams. When she awoke, the doctors spoke words that destroyed her world. Complete paralysis below the waist. Her parents had died years ago in a car accident, leaving her in the care of her grandmother. A woman of strength, dignity, and quiet pride. "Hold your head high," her grandmother had said. "Rich or poor, you are still my granddaughter." That means something. But cancer claimed her grandmother too, leaving Emma in a tiny apartment, surrounded by loneliness, surviving on disability checks and online piano lessons. Her beloved upright piano, a gift from her grandmother, had been sold to pay medical bills. Now, Emma was just a shadow of the girl who dreamed in music, sitting in a chair by the bakery window. The smallest cake cost $4. She had $3. She couldn't even afford a celebration. Sophie pressed her face to the glass of the display, fogging it slightly, pointing at cakes as if judging them with childlike authority. "Can we get 2, Daddy?" she asked, eyes wide, excitement bubbling. "One for now, one for later." Daniel Thompson, her father, had been through loss too. 4 years ago, his wife Sarah had died suddenly from a brain aneurysm. Sophie had barely been 2. He had rebuilt his life around her, a single father with a multi-million-dollar fortune that never defined him. He dressed simply, jeans, flannel shirt, boots. Money had never replaced love, and today he had promised Sophie any treat she wanted. Sophie's finger hovered over a chocolate cake decorated with rainbow sprinkles and star candles. Daniel smiled, watching her deliberation with patience only a father could muster. But his attention shifted when he noticed Emma, maneuvering her wheelchair toward the door, eyes downcast. The sadness radiating from her drew Sophie's attention immediately. "Daddy, she's pretty," Sophie said, curious. "Why is she in that chair? Did she hurt her legs?" Emma froze. She wasn't used to this directness. Adults tiptoed around her disability with euphemisms, polite avoidance. Sophie asked it bluntly, innocent, kind. "It's okay," Emma whispered. "I was in an accident. My legs don't work anymore." Sophie studied her with the scrutiny only a child could apply. "You don't have a birthday cake," she declared. "That's 2 problems. We can fix that, right, Daddy?" Daniel glanced at Emma, uncertain. "Would you let us buy your cake? A gift from strangers who believe birthdays should always have cake." Emma shook her head almost instinctively. Pride fought poverty. "I can't. You don't even know me." "Then let's change that," Daniel said, kneeling to her level. "I'm Daniel. This is Sophie. Now we're not strangers." "And Sophie's right. Birthdays without cake are against the rules." The little girl grabbed Emma's hand. The kindness was overwhelming. Emma's chest tightened. She nodded, barely able to speak, pointing to a small vanilla cake. The clerk boxed it up, smiling knowingly. Daniel slipped a $20 into the tip jar, unnoticed as the transaction completed. For the first time that day, Emma allowed herself to smile. Sophie chattered endlessly about school, hamsters, unicorns, and chapter books. Daniel watched, quietly noting how Emma's voice, so long absent from laughter, had returned. They sat at a small table by the window. Outside, snow fell quietly, turning the street white. Inside, warmth returned to Emma's life. Plates, forks, laughter, a single candle. Sophie insisted they sing Happy Birthday, her voice ringing like tiny bells, Daniel's baritone joining in harmony. Emma closed her eyes to make a wish. Not for walking, not for impossible miracles, just for a few moments of joy, the warmth of kindness, the comfort of connection. She blew out the candle. Sophie cheered as if a mountain had been moved. Her heart, frozen for years, cracked open just a little. Emma took a shaky breath. The chocolate and vanilla cakes sat between her and Sophie, warm from the bakery's gentle ovens. The snow outside continued falling, turning the city street into a muted winter wonderland. Inside, however, the room hummed with life, small, human, precious. Sophie leaned forward, her green eyes wide, completely oblivious to Emma's hesitation. "Do you want to sit with us?" she asked, pointing to the space beside her. "Cake tastes better with more people." "That's a rule," Emma hesitated. Accepting charity was one thing. Crossing the line into someone's personal world felt dangerous, vulnerable. She had spent years protecting herself from hope, because hope always hurt. "Always left you empty-handed, and yet—" Sophie's little hand, warm and insistent, tugged at her heart. She couldn't resist, not this time. Sliding into the empty seat, Emma felt the warmth of human connection for the first time in years. Daniel smiled gently, the kind of smile that said, "I see you. You matter, not pity, not obligation, just acknowledgement." Sophie clapped her hands. "We sing first. Happy birthday." Her high, clear voice carried like a bell. Daniel's deep baritone provided harmony. Emma's eyes welled with tears. She had sung with her grandmother long ago, but no one had sung to her in years, not really. Not with love. When the song ended, Sophie insisted she make a wish. Emma closed her eyes. "What do you wish for when your life feels like shattered glass? Not walking again, not parents back, not miracles that no one could promise." She wished for a moment of warmth that would last just a little longer, for kindness to feel real, for this snow, this laughter, this cake to exist without disappearing the next second. She blew out the single candle, and Sophie cheered like she had conquered the world. The bakery clerk winked, a silent acknowledgement of the small miracle that had just occurred. "Emma, tell me about your life," Daniel asked gently, breaking the silence. His voice was soft, patient, inviting trust without forcing it. Emma took a deep breath. Music, once her life, her joy, had been taken. The accident had not just broken her body, it had shattered her identity. "I studied piano." "At the conservatory," she whispered. "I lived it, breathed it. My whole world was the piano bench, and then it all stopped." She gestured vaguely to her legs, the wheelchair, the invisible barriers life had thrown in her path. Daniel nodded, understanding more than she could know. Loss had touched him deeply, too. Sarah, gone too soon. Sophie, their little universe built from grief and love intertwined. "You were alone," he said softly. "And now you're here." Sophie leaned forward, her small hands folded in serious thought. "Daddy," she said, "we need her. She should be our birthday person." Emma swallowed hard. She wasn't used to this. People had looked at her with pity. They had offered help, smiles, encouragement, but not this. Not inclusion, not recognition, not kindness without strings. She found herself drawn to this tiny girl's insistence. Daniel watched, seeing something he hadn't expected, something beyond attraction, compassion, connection, hope. Emma wasn't just a woman in a wheelchair. She was a survivor, someone who had endured loss, loneliness, and poverty, yet retained a spark of strength and beauty that radiated in subtle ways. "Would you like to come to our house?" Daniel asked finally, gently. "We were going to have a cake celebration anyway." "It's better with more people." Emma froze. His words were simple, normal, dangerous, and inviting. Fear whispered in her ear. She wanted to retreat, protect herself. Hope could be painful. But Sophie's little hand, her green eyes, her insistence, held her there. Yes, Emma whispered, before fear could change her mind. The drive to Daniel's house was a journey from Emma's world to a place that felt like another life. Her small apartment lined with peeling wallpaper, the radiator clanging like chains, the loneliness pressing in. All of it faded behind the warmth of the van and the chatter of Sophie. Sophie pointed out every detail outside the window. Christmas lights already twinkling in early November, houses set back from the road like shy giants. The streets grew more affluent as they drove, tree-lined avenues, pristine lawns, and houses that seemed to breathe elegance and care. Emma felt a pang of inadequacy, her thrift store coat clashing against leather seats and spotless interiors. "Over there," Sophie said, pointing at a massive colonial. "That's our house. We have a tree. And ornaments. You'll help decorate, right?" Emma laughed softly. The sound felt strange in her own ears. "I don't usually decorate," she admitted. "That's okay." "You will now," Sophie said firmly, with the confidence of someone who decided rules for everyone. Daniel glanced at her from the driver's seat. "You okay?" he asked softly. "We can take you home if you'd like." "No," Emma said quickly. "I'm fine." Inside, the house was large but not intimidating. Warm, lived in. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator. Toys were scattered across the floor, paint splatters marking creative chaos. And then, the piano. A Steinway grand, majestic even under a layer of dust. Black, gleaming, waiting. Daniel gestured toward it. "It needs tuning, but it's here for you. Whenever you want." Emma's hands trembled as she wheeled toward it. She lifted the fallboard, fingers brushing the cool ivory and ebony keys. A simple scale, tentative, then a chord. Then a melody. Her fingers remembered. A song her grandmother used to hum in the kitchen while baking. Her music alive again, filling the room, chasing shadows. Sophie stood, mouth open in awe. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, watching. Emma, broken for years, was luminous again. Whole, alive, creating beauty from her pain. Time seemed to stretch. Hours passed unnoticed. Daniel worked quietly in the next room, laptop open, but attention often wandering to the piano. Sophie giggled, asked questions, tried notes, learned finger positions. Emma guided her, patient, precise, filled with a joy she hadn't known in years. Dinner came, simple, spaghetti and garlic bread, Sophie's favorite. They ate, sharing stories, laughing. Emma felt human again. Not a charity case, not invisible, present, needed, valued, loved. The evening wound down. Daniel drove Emma home, Sophie asleep in the back seat, small snores drifting against the hum of the van. "Thank you," Daniel said softly, looking at her. "For the music, for the laughter, for being you," Emma smiled. "Thank you for cake, and for seeing me." The first spark of something extraordinary had begun. The snow fell silently outside, covering the city in white. Inside Emma's heart, warmth returned. Slowly, fragile, but real. The world had shifted. $3 for a birthday cake had led to a doorway. A connection, a chance. And Emma, for the first time in years, believed she might just belong. The following morning, Emma found herself wide awake, heart still racing from the day before. Sunlight filtered through her apartment window, reflecting off the small stack of crumpled bills she had saved so carefully. $3. $3 had led to cake, to warmth, to laughter she hadn't felt in years. She stared at the tiny amount in her hand, incredulous at the power it had carried. By the time she arrived at Daniel's house, Sophie was already bouncing around, her pink slippers scuffing against the hardwood floor. "Emma, Emma! Come teach me," she shouted before the door fully closed behind them. The morning smelled like fresh coffee, vanilla from leftover cake, and faint hints of the pine from their half-decorated Christmas tree. Emma smiled nervously. Teaching a child seemed simpler than teaching adults, but Sophie was eager, perceptive, and impatient for progress. She grabbed a notebook from the table, scrawled with unicorns and stars, her own rules for magic, as she called them. Emma tried to suppress the laugh bubbling up. This little girl had a worldview entirely dictated by curiosity. kindness, and imagination. Today, Emma said softly. We start with scales. Sophie groaned dramatically but smiled, all the while bouncing on her toes. Daniel, seated in the next room, kept an eye on them, pretending to work but peeking occasionally over the laptop. There was something hypnotic about the domestic rhythm forming around Emma. The hum of life, filled with small, ordinary moments, felt like a balm for her fragile heart. Sophie's fingers stumbled initially, landing wrong, stretching too far, but Emma guided them patiently. Music isn't about perfection, she whispered. It's about feeling, listening, making the song yours. Sophie tilted her head, trying to understand, eyes wide. Daniel watched, heart swelling. Emma's voice, soft but confident, resonated through the room. She wasn't just teaching notes. She was teaching resilience, patience, and joy. Every tiny victory, a correct chord, a rhythm finally held steady, was celebrated with high fives, smiles, and laughter that seemed to push the shadows further back in the house. By noon, Daniel had closed the laptop entirely. I think you two are making magic without me, he said dryly, though the smile tugging at his lips betrayed him. Emma looked up, cheeks flushed, and realized just how much she had been holding her breath, guarding her heart. But in this house, with these two, something began to thaw. Lunch was a simple affair. Mac and cheese with extra cheese and breadcrumbs, garlic bread on the side. Sophie chatted incessantly, detailing every aspect of her morning. How she had noticed the neighbor's cat sneaking across the yard. How her teacher had praised her reading. How she thought magic existed in everyday things. Emma listened, laughed, responded, realizing that for the first time in years, her presence mattered simply because it existed. After lunch, they returned to the piano. Emma watched Sophie's tiny fingers, her attention unwavering. Remember, music is more than just notes. It's storytelling, Emma instructed. Every key you press tells a part of a story. Make it meaningful. Sophie nodded solemnly, as if she truly understood. The child's focus was absolute, yet there was room for curiosity and whimsy, the balance Emma hadn't realized she had missed. The afternoon passed in a blur of sound. Chords, scales, melodies, laughter, the occasional frustrated groan. Emma felt alive again. Each note, each carefully guided hand, was a reminder that life could still hold beauty, even after loss, even after years of loneliness. Evening came quietly, soft snow painting the world outside white. Emma had grown comfortable enough to watch Daniel interact with Sophie in ways that felt natural and unforced. His patience, humor, and love were evident in every small gesture. The way he adjusted Sophie's hair before a chord, the way he encouraged her tiny missteps, the way his eyes softened whenever he looked at Emma. Daniel himself returned to the piano, leaning casually against the bench as Emma and Sophie played a simple duet. He hummed along, low and steady, creating a living harmony that wrapped around the small family. Music became their language, connecting them without words, filling gaps that grief and isolation had left. Sophie's laughter, pure and untainted by adult worries, broke through the tension Emma had carried for years. She realized how starved she had been for connection that didn't demand pity or charity. Here, she was not just Emma in a wheelchair. She was Emma, the teacher. Emma, the musician. Emma, a participant in a family she hadn't expected to have. Dinner that night was quiet, but warm. Daniel had prepared spaghetti, garlic bread, and a small salad. Simple, ordinary, perfect. They ate together at the table, a rhythm forming naturally, each bite punctuated by small talk, laughter, and the occasional playful squabble over who got the last piece of garlic bread. Emma felt herself relax, realizing she could breathe here, that the walls she had built to protect herself could be gently lowered. After dinner, they moved to the living room to decorate the Christmas tree. Emma sorted ornaments while Daniel lifted Sophie to reach higher branches. The small acts, the laughter, the cooperation, the shared joy, began to stitch together the frayed edges of Emma's heart. This was something she hadn't known she missed. A family, a rhythm, a sense of belonging. Sophie picked up a delicate glass angel, her mother's favorite ornament. She paused, quiet for the first time that evening. "You do it this year," Daniel said gently. Emma held her breath, touched by the intimacy of the moment, aware of the fragile trust she was being offered. Together they placed the angel atop the tree, a symbol not just of memory but of connection, of inclusion, of acceptance. Weeks passed. Emma's visits became routine, something she looked forward to despite the initial trepidation. Piano lessons with Sophie grew in complexity and depth, the little girl's intuitive grasp of rhythm and melody astounding. Emma began creating exercises, stories told through music, each lesson a journey of growth, discipline and joy. Daniel, increasingly present, sometimes joined the lessons, providing harmonies and encouragement. Emma began to feel a sense of partnership she hadn't experienced since losing her parents, since losing her grandmother. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, participating in a life rich with laughter, music, and warmth. Sophie's world and Emma's world intertwined seamlessly. Emma taught her more than piano, patience, attention to detail, the joy of persistence. Sophie reminded Emma to laugh, to see the whimsy in the world, to reclaim hope in small doses. Together they found balance. Together they created a rhythm that filled Daniel's house with life and warmth. Even mundane tasks, setting the table, cleaning up after lessons, running small errands, took on new meaning in this shared life. Each moment became an opportunity for connection, for teaching, for learning. Emma's presence was no longer defined by disability or past loss. It was defined by contribution, love, and shared experience. As the first snow of December fell, Emma realized how far she had come. From the quiet, lonely apartment with crumpled bills in a jar, she had arrived here, a place filled with warmth, music, laughter, and unexpected love. The walls she had built around her heart were still there, but they no longer imprisoned her. They framed her, offering safety while allowing light to pour in. Daniel's steady presence, Sophie's boundless energy, and the music they created together were more than mere comfort. They were evidence that life could surprise, that kindness could transform, that connection could heal wounds left open for years. Emma felt herself allowing hope, fragile as it was, to take root. And for the first time in years, she believed that her life could hold joy, not just moments of it, but a sustained, enduring rhythm of love, music, and family. Morning light spilled across Daniel's kitchen, dusting the countertops in gold. Outside, a soft frost clung to the trees, glinting like tiny crystals. Emma parked her wheelchair in the familiar spot, her fingers tracing the worn edges of her music notebook. Sophie, already awake, bounded toward her like a shooting star, her laughter cutting through the quiet room. "Good morning, Emma." "Did you bring your magic?" Sophie asked, eyes wide with expectation. Emma smiled, feeling the familiar warmth settle in her chest. The magic wasn't in the music alone, it was in the space they had created together. A sanctuary of laughter, learning, and acceptance. Daniel appeared from the office, hair slightly tousled, glasses sliding down his nose. He carried a cup of coffee, but his gaze lingered on Emma, eyes soft with something unspoken. Over the past weeks, subtle changes had woven themselves into their interactions, a glance that lingered too long, a touch that brushed against hers while guiding Sophie, a shared smile over a perfectly played chord. "Ready for today?" Emma asked Sophie. Sophie nodded solemnly, bouncing in place. "Yes, today we conquer the C minor scale." The lesson began with playful determination. Sophie's fingers stumbled occasionally, but Emma's patient guidance turned mistakes into discoveries. "Remember," she said softly, "music tells stories. You decide what story your hands will tell." Sophie's brow furrowed as she pressed the keys with intent. The room filled with the soft, tentative sound of a child learning to make magic. Daniel watched from the doorway, noting how Emma moved effortlessly between teacher, mentor, and friend. Her confidence, once fragile, now radiated in the way she encouraged Sophie, corrected her, and celebrated her small victories. He realized, with a pang he hadn't anticipated, that Emma had become indispensable, not just to Sophie, but to him. Afternoons were a new kind of adventure. Emma found herself sharing lunch with Daniel and Sophie, the clatter of forks and the hum of casual conversation filling the room with warmth. The small vanilla cake from weeks ago had become a symbol, a reminder of kindness, of connection, of moments that mattered. Sometimes, after a lesson, they would sit with forks poised over cake, sharing stories of past birthdays, childhood memories, and dreams for the future. "Emma," Sophie said one afternoon, chocolate smudge on her cheek, "do you think birthdays always have to be happy?" Emma paused, considering. She remembered the lonely winters of her past, the empty apartments, the quiet streets where no one waited for her. "Not always," she said softly, "but they can be. They can remind us that even if life has been hard, kindness exists. And sometimes happiness is a choice we make in small moments." Sophie nodded thoughtfully, eyes bright. "Then every day can have cake?" Emma laughed. "In a way, yes. Every day can have cake if we decide it does." The child's grin was radiant. And in that moment, Emma felt the fragile thread of hope tighten into something stronger, something lasting. Evenings brought new challenges. Daniel's home, though warm, was filled with echoes of loss. Sophie's laughter could not entirely drown out the memory of Sarah, whose absence was a constant, gentle ache. Emma understood this intimately. Loss had carved deep valleys in her life. Her parents, her grandmother, the accident that had stolen her mobility, the isolation that had followed. Yet she found that these shared vulnerabilities created space for trust. One evening, after Sophie had been tucked into bed, Daniel and Emma sat at the piano. The room was quiet, the only light from the soft glow of the table lamp. Daniel hesitated before speaking, voice low, almost vulnerable. "You know, I've watched you with her, and I can see how much she trusts you." "How much I trust you." Emma's hands stilled over the keys, a mixture of surprise and uncertainty washing over her. She began, then stopped. Words felt inadequate for the depth of feeling that surged within her. Daniel continued. "It's not just Sophie. It's me too. I feel different around you, safe, seen. Like the part of me I've been protecting for years doesn't need armor anymore." Emma swallowed, heart pounding. She had spent so long protecting herself from hope, from disappointment, from being used or pitied. But here, in this room filled with faint piano notes and the soft glow of lamplight, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that someone could care for her not out of duty, but out of genuine love. Their relationship, delicate yet profound, unfolded in quiet moments. The small gestures, the way Daniel adjusted Sophie's hair, the way Emma's hand lingered on Sophie's while guiding a chord, the shared smiles over a perfectly played scale, became the foundation of trust. Emma realized that she could belong somewhere again, not as a visitor, not as a charity case, but as a part of a living, breathing family. Music became the language of their bond. Emma composed small pieces for Sophie, each one a story. Sophie responded with melodies of her own, full of curiosity, wonder, and unrefined brilliance. Daniel joined in occasionally, creating harmonies that transformed their simple sessions into something magical. The house, once quiet and heavy with absence, became a sanctuary of sound and connection. One afternoon, Emma found herself laughing freely at Sophie's attempts to compose a piece about a unicorn who saved the world. Daniel's eyes lingered on her, softening with unspoken admiration. Emma realized that the fear she had carried for so long, the fear of being too broken, too different, was slowly dissipating. In this house, she was not defined by her wheelchair, her losses, or her past. She was defined by the music, the laughter, and the bonds she nurtured. As weeks turned into months, their routine solidified. Emma's visits became the highlight of her week. Lessons, laughter, shared meals, quiet evenings by the piano. They built a rhythm that was both comforting and exhilarating. Sophie's growth was rapid, not just musically but emotionally. She learned patience, focus, and the joy of creation. Emma's guidance became integral to her development, and Sophie's enthusiasm reminded Emma of the power of hope and innocence. Daniel noticed subtle changes in Emma too. The stiffness in her shoulders, the careful hesitation in her movements, began to ease. She laughed more freely, her smiles lingering. She shared stories from her past, memories that had once been locked away. And slowly, he realized that he wasn't just drawn to her kindness and talent. He was falling for her entirely. The tension between Emma and Daniel, previously unspoken, grew undeniable. Moments of accidental touch, shared laughter, and lingering glances filled the air with an electric current. Neither could deny the feelings stirring within them, yet both approached them cautiously, aware of the fragility of trust, the weight of history, and the presence of a child who deserves stability and love. Then came the snowy afternoon that changed everything. Emma had stayed later than usual, helping Sophie perfect a small composition she wanted to play for her kindergarten class. Daniel entered the room, carrying 2 cups of cocoa. The warm smell of chocolate and marshmallows filled the space. "Emma," he said softly, setting a cup beside her, "there's something I need to tell you." His voice held a gravity that made Emma's heart skip. She looked up, meeting his eyes. "Yes?" Daniel took a deep breath, the pause stretching in the quiet room. I think I'm falling for you, not just because of what you do for Sophie, not just because of the music, but because of who you are. The woman you've always been beneath the pain, the loss, the years of solitude. I see her, Emma. I see you." Emma felt her chest tighten, emotions overwhelming. She wanted to retreat, to shield herself from the vulnerability. But the sincerity in his eyes, the steady warmth in his voice, broke down the walls she had spent years building. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Daniel replied gently. "Just know that I'm here, and Sophie and we want you in our lives. Not as someone to fix things, not as a project, but as someone we love and value. The choice is yours entirely." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. For the first time, she felt seen, not for her disability, not for her past, but for her essence. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. Sophie, who had been quietly observing, tugged at Emma's sleeve. "You don't have to say yes today, but maybe you could just stay a little longer?" Emma laughed softly, the tension easing. "I can do that." The 3 of them sat together, sipping cocoa, surrounded by the faint hum of the piano. Outside, snow fell quietly, covering the world in white. Inside, Emma felt the warmth of belonging, of family, of love. The snow outside had thickened into a gentle storm, each flake drifting lazily, settling on windowsills and tree branches. Inside Daniel's home, the warmth was tangible, a contrast to the chill beyond the walls. Emma had arrived early, pushing her wheelchair into the familiar space near the piano. The soft click of the wheels against the hardwood floor was almost musical, blending with the quiet hum of the heater and the faint creak of the old house settling. Sophie, as usual, greeted her with unrestrained enthusiasm. "Emma, today's the big day!" she squealed, tugging at her sleeves, eyes sparkling with anticipation. Emma smiled, lifting her hands slightly above the keys. "And what makes today so special?" Sophie's grin widened. "It's the first day we decorate the tree together. And then, surprise lesson for me." Daniel emerged from the office, holding a stack of boxes filled with ornaments. His expression was gentle, yet there was a subtle tension around his jawline, an unspoken awareness that today, like many days before, was different. Emma noticed it immediately. Something significant was about to happen. The afternoon unfolded in a rhythm of joy, laughter, and small domestic rituals. Emma helped Sophie untangle strings of lights while Daniel carefully positioned the ornaments. The house filled with a sense of anticipation, every movement purposeful, every smile meaningful. Emma felt the strange, wonderful sensation of belonging, not as a visitor, not as someone being pitied, but as a part of this family's heartbeat. Sophie clutched a delicate glass angel, her small fingers trembling. "Mommy's favorite," she whispered. Daniel's expression softened as he took the angel gently from her hands. "Do you want to place it this year?" he asked, voice careful, almost reverent. Sophie shook her head. "You do it, but Emma should watch." Emma's heart swelled with something she hadn't felt in years: trust, inclusion, the fragile joy of being considered essential. Daniel lifted Sophie onto the ladder, carefully balancing her small frame, while Emma watched, feeling the quiet power of being welcomed into this intimate tradition. When the angel finally crowned the tree, Sophie clapped her hands with pure delight, and Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. This was family. This was love. This was the kind of moment she had longed for since the accident that had stolen so much from her. As the evening shadows deepened, Emma sat at the piano, fingers brushing lightly across the keys. Daniel approached quietly, leaning against the doorway. "Emma," he said softly, "I've been thinking about us." Emma looked up, wary. "Us?" "Yes, you, me, Sophie. The way things have grown, how it feels like you've been here longer than just a few months. I can't ignore it anymore. And I don't want to." Emma's chest tightened. The vulnerability, the intensity of his gaze was almost too much. She had spent so long guarding her heart, protecting herself from loss, from disappointment, from pity. But Daniel's presence, steady and genuine, made it difficult to retreat. I don't know if I can," she whispered. "I've lost everything before." "What if I lose you too?" Daniel stepped closer, voice gentle yet firm. "It's not about fear. It's about choice. I choose you. Sophie chooses you. And if you let yourself, you can choose us too." Sophie, who had been quietly observing from the couch, piped up with the directness of a child who saw all. "Emma, you saved me twice. Once at the crosswalk and once when I was sad. You belong here. Don't you want to belong?" The truth in Sophie's words broke through Emma's defenses. She had spent years surviving, existing, guarding her heart. But now, in this space, with these two who had welcomed her so fully, she realized that belonging was not something she had to earn. It was something she could embrace. Tears flowed freely as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "I want to belong." Daniel's face lit with relief and joy. He knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her hands in his. "Then let's start building our life together. No rush, no pressure. Just us, learning, laughing, loving. The next weeks were a revelation." Emma moved seamlessly into their home, balancing her own apartment and life, while becoming part of Daniel and Sophie's daily rhythm. Piano lessons flourished. Sophie's talent blossomed, her confidence growing in leaps and bounds. Emma's guidance shaped not just her musical skills, but her character, patience, and resilience. Daniel and Emma found small, intimate moments to connect. Quiet breakfasts, shared jokes over coffee, late-night piano duets. The tension between them softened into something tender and natural. Each touch, glance, and smile was a thread weaving them closer together, creating a tapestry of trust and love. The chocolate and vanilla cakes that had once been symbols of generosity became everyday celebrations of connection. Emma baked with Sophie, teaching her small techniques, laughing when frosting landed on noses or fingertips. Daniel joined in sometimes, creating an orchestra of laughter, flour, and the occasional mess. The house, once quiet, had become alive with warmth, music, and shared joy. One crisp evening in early December, Daniel led Emma and Sophie to the living room, where a magnificent Christmas tree dominated the space. "We have a surprise," he announced. Sophie bounced eagerly, eyes wide. Daniel handed Emma a small wrapped box. "For you," he said softly. Emma unwrapped it to find a delicate music box, carved with intricate designs and inlaid with mother-of-pearl keys. She opened it, and a soft, familiar melody filled the room, the first song she had ever taught Sophie. Her hands trembled as memories flooded back. The lonely apartment, the small $3 cake, the bakery, the first lesson, the laughter, the tears, the trust, the love. "This is beautiful," she whispered. Daniel smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's a reminder that even small things like a $3 cake can lead to something extraordinary. That love, kindness, and music can heal." Sophie clapped, bouncing with excitement. "It's magic, just like you, Emma." Emma laughed, tears streaming freely. "Yes, magic." Months passed and life settled into a rhythm of love, trust, and shared dreams. Emma's blog grew, chronicling the journey from loss to rediscovery, attracting thousands inspired by her resilience and hope. The piano school expanded, helping children with disabilities find their voice through music. Daniel and Emma's relationship deepened, their love a quiet, powerful current that anchored their lives. Then came the day Daniel had been waiting for, nerves visible beneath his composed exterior. Dinner was finished, Sophie asleep upstairs, the house quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. Daniel knelt beside Emma, holding her hands, heart racing. "Emma," he said, voice trembling with emotion, "you saved my daughter twice. You brought music, laughter, and light back into our lives. Will you marry me?" Emma's hands shook as tears flowed freely. Words failed her, so she simply nodded, leaning into him. Daniel lifted her gently from her wheelchair, holding her close as they kissed, the world outside fading into a blur of snow and light. Sophie woke just in time to witness, clapping and cheering, declaring that it was perfectly magical. Their wedding was small but radiant, a celebration of love, resilience, and family. Emma, in her wheelchair, glided down the aisle with Daniel by her side. Sophie stood as maid of honor, beaming with pride. When the rings were exchanged, the soft melody of a piano played in the background. Emma's own composition, a story of hope, of kindness, and of second chances. Years later, the tradition continued. Every birthday, Emma, Daniel, and Sophie visited the bakery, buying cakes for those in need. The simple act of kindness multiplied, spreading hope, creating smiles, and changing lives. Emma wrote a book, dedicated to her grandmother, Sophie, and Daniel, chronicling their journey and the transformative power of love. The piano school thrived, giving children with disabilities a space to express themselves and find joy. Emma, now in her early 30s, sat at the piano in their home, fingers dancing across the keys. Daniel worked nearby, Sophie painting, laughter filling the room. Outside, snow fell gently, as it had on that day when $3 was all she had. But unlike that winter morning, this time Emma had everything that mattered: love, family, hope, and the music that bound them all together. And as the final notes echoed through the warm, safe house, Emma smiled, remembering that small beginnings, like a $3 birthday cake, could lead to the most extraordinary, life-changing stories.